There we are.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Jen. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Good, good, good.
Good, good. We want to just welcome everybody who's joining and saying good morning on this Friday morning, Friday noon, 12:30, lunchtime. And we're so glad that you're able to join us. As many of you know, Kula for Karma is a nonprofit that provides mindfulness-based mental health care to marginalized and underserved communities. We're a national nonprofit, and we meet people where they are in addiction recovery centers, in hospitals, in schools, in juvenile detention centers, group homes for kids, and all types of community spaces. And mindfulness-based mental health care includes gentle and restorative yoga. It includes guided meditation and breath work techniques that are scientifically backed and proven to be very effective for mental health and help us all learn to manage our nervous systems and to really change our brains, change our bodies, so that we are healthier and happier. So we're running a campaign in May called Mental Health is My Human Right. And we're really just trying to spread awareness about mindfulness-based mental health care as an accessible, affordable, and equitable solution to our country's mental health crisis. And we're so glad today to have Gregory Johnson with us, longtime friend of mine, somebody that I just have so much love and respect for. And Reverend Gregory Johnson is the president and CEO of Greg Johnson Partnerships International. And in New York, he serves as the chief advisor for family caregiving at Emblem Health, office of the CEO. He's going to be presenting, I believe this summer, at the International Federation on Aging Global Conference at the end of June in Bangkok. And his topic there is going to be Make the Circle Wider, invite all the stakeholders to the table, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Greg considers his life in three acts. He's a musician, and international business entrepreneur, and a healthcare professional through his ministry in family caregiving. That's what we're here today to talk about. He was ordained in 2002 as an interfaith minister, and as a family caregiver himself, continues his 22 years of creating Emblem Health's Care for the Family Caregiver Initiative, which is just incredible, along with his activities as a keynote speaker, a motivational speaker, an author, lecturer, private counselor, and retreat leader. So we're so excited to have you with us, Greg, to talk about caregiving and mental health for caregivers today.
Well, thank you. And Kula for Karma is doing incredible work. I'm thrilled, and they're blessed to have you. I've known you for a very long time. We've done many projects together in the world of caregiving and caring, and I'm thrilled to participate in this because I learned a great deal in talking with you about the wonderful work that's being done, and we are body, mind, and spirit. And as we have issues in each and every one of those areas, caregivers get it almost a double dose of it because they get it for themselves, but also the person or persons for whom they're caregiving.
Yeah. And Greg, speaking of caregivers, I feel like so many people in the world don't realize that they're caregivers. They don't consider themselves caregivers. They're just doing what they need to do day to day. Tell us, what is a caregiver? Who's a caregiver?
Well, that's the perfect question and the perfect place to begin. It's really very simple. A family caregiver is a person who provides unpaid care for a relative or a loved one. Now, a number of other easier, shorter definitions exist, but I wanted to share with you, if I can find it, just one moment. Oh yes, here we are. What is a family caregiver from the Emblem Health website? Because it's exactly that question that begins it as well. People who step in to help friends, relatives, neighbors, or life partners with health problems or disabilities are family caregivers. This help ranges from grocery shopping, helping with personal grooming and meal preparation, to providing financial support and basic assistance with medical needs. Now, that's a fuller statement, but what it does say to us, and the thing that I love for people to know, in building the world that I've had the privilege of doing for, it's actually the last 24 years with Emblem, is, yes, people for so long did not identify it. They felt they couldn't say it. I'm supposed to do this. This is my obligation. All of these sorts of things, which kept them as the silent patients, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But as I began my study, I kept finding wonderful mentors. One of them was Carol Levine, and she wrote a book. The first book that she wrote was entitled Always on Call. Now, I think that's the best definition for a family caregiver. It's someone who is always on call. And as I've always said, it never happens between 9 and 5. It happens when you got to push a bunch of buttons and go crazy. And that tests my mental health. I don't know about anybody else. And another one that Carol used to use, and I love this because she was a brilliant mentor to me, and I'm always very grateful. But I liked this. She said a family caregiver is someone who shows up, here's the hard part, and stays to help. And stays to help. So, and I mean, it's a constant learning experience because a bit later, but they're a caregiver.
And Greg, I think you made a point that we often forget in our society. It's unpaid. People are trying to squeeze this difficult work in between their full-time jobs and their daily lives and anything else that they're responsible for. And really, you know, it's such difficult work because it's so emotional too. Often caring for a sick relative or ill parents, or even your own children, as a mom or a dad or a, you know, co-parent, it's very emotional work. And so you're also just giving so much of the self. And I feel like that just creates a situation of where so many people feel overwhelmed, underappreciated.
All of the above.
What are some of the issues? Because I know that you're doing so much, and you have been doing so much around family caregiving to try to create a new scenario in our country, you know, for family caregivers. What are some of the issues, political, financial, otherwise,
well,
that you...
That's a big question, but let me just share it. To your earlier point, the overwhelming work that a family caregiver does is really often, that job is 24/7, and they sandwich into it whatever their world of employment is. And we're spending more and more time trying to help corporations come to understand that both of these roles are happening, and it's not negative to announce them. And so it comes down to understanding families of origin and families of choice. But also our corporations are our families. I have a caregiving community in this 21-story apartment building in Manhattan. We are a family of choice. So there are lots of families of choice which can become a resource, but also is something that we need to put into consideration because it's where resources and help can come from. And then naming caregiving is so important. Naming it and knowing its many faces. And you and I have done many programs on that. It's not just elderly people like me, but it's grandparents raising grandchildren. It's the wonderful world of veterans where we have kinship, which is grandparents or intergenerational caregiving. But there are also chronic conditions. There are long distance caregiving because we travel and we're all over and we're using more and more of this sort of mode. And and the pandemic really brought us all into caregiving.
Yeah.
But in family caregiving, and you know this so well, and it applies so much to the wonderful work you're doing, there is only one rule, and it's a rule that we often forget. Before I can care for you, I've got to care for myself. That's not selfish.
Yeah.
You cannot give what you don't have. You need to give from your abundance, or you're going to collapse. I often say when I speak to church groups, you can't sing "Lean on Me" and both fall over, which is what happens when we don't care for ourselves.
And Greg, many of us are culturally socialized in our different communities and places of origin. I was raised in the South, and as a female in the South, really anything you do is selfish. Much less prioritizing yourself, prioritizing your time. What can caregivers do to feel better about doing what you're saying?
Well, one is I pray that it's listening to these sorts of programs. I've been doing for years now programs online. One of them is called Onward in Love and Caregiving. It's a 30-minute program on a Friday morning, simply to talk about caregiving, so that they don't have to go anywhere, don't have to get fixed up, the whole thing. You just maybe play it in the background even as you're dealing with someone, but you come to understand that you are not alone. And it's so important. And fortunately, I think that's a gift of technology, and I have entered the world of technology kicking and screaming, but surrounded myself by brilliant people who know how to use it. And there are many, many good programs. Also, that getting caregivers to realize that there are online support groups. There is nothing more valuable, and I'm preaching to the choir when I talk to you, than the caregiver support group, because suddenly you hear another voice telling your story, and suddenly you say, yes, that's how I feel. Yeah. I wanted to strangle him. It's not you wanted to murder somebody or whatever, but you get to a certain point, and then suddenly that comes all the guilt. Oh, I shouldn't. And I always say, don't let anyone should all over you, and most of all yourself. Feelings aren't facts. If that's how you felt, you felt.
I needed to hear that. I learned that, during the pandemic, being parents, suddenly having to work from home with a 3-year-old there and no one to help with the 3-year-old as we did Zoom meetings and work. And, I feel like you alluded to this earlier, that so many people who may not have had an experience with caregiving before in this close up of a way may have experienced that during the pandemic because of all the things that happened. And so there's a lot of value in just people having that experience and being able to empathize more. You empathize more than anyone I know. How did you come to be involved in this issue of family caregiving?
Well, that is a special story. I'm grateful you asked me that question, because I'm very grateful. It started actually in 1999. I was recovering from several strokes, and so I affectionately say I was in my Queen Mother period on my 2 canes, trying to learn to walk once again. And the Reverend Dr. Carl Flemister, who he's now passed on, but had been a very, very dear friend of mine and had been very active in the Baptist churches throughout America, he had retired and become the chairman of what is now Emblem Health's foundation. And Carl and I would often have lunch together. We were longtime friends. And so we had lunch, and he was telling me, we really need to make a big change. He said, healthcare is a 3-legged stool. And we've concentrated on the care recipient, and we continue to do that. Person who's sick, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And we know that when one aspect, it tends to be all 3. Then there is the professional caregivers, from the highest paid doctors to the very underpaid home health care attendants. But the third leg of that stool, for so long, has not been honored, has not been made a partner of, and has just sort of been pushed off, and that's the family caregiver, and they've become the silent patients.
Oh, wow.
And I said, Carl, I think that, isn't that, yeah. And I said to Carl, I said, well, that's exciting, never thinking he's talking to me other than as two friends talking about what we're doing. And he looked at me and he said, Greg, no, I want you to create that program. Well, little did I know he was giving me my ministry at that moment. And I looked at him and I said, Carl, you know my background. It's theater and theology. I don't know anything about insurance, but I have learned. And he said, that's not a worry, we'll teach you. But I said, there is something that truly, truly speaks to my heart with what you're doing. I said, I don't know about you, Carl, but as an ordained interfaith minister, I have buried more caregivers than care recipients.
Wow.
And that, I said, if there is some way I could make any contribution to turning that around in some small way, count me in.
Wow.
I'm willing to learn. And that's where it began. And so I was surrounded by wonderful medical people, wonderful people in the psychology world, people in hospice, and all the pieces of healthcare. I mean, to the point that I was elected as a fellow of the New York Academy of Medicine. I mean, there's one minister sitting there. They want to know what sort of doctor I am, and I said, no. Different collar. Different collar. But it has been that sort of a journey. And so, because I did not come from a medical background, and I began, and he had said to me, he said, Greg, our focus would be first our employees, which I love, secondly our members, and the third the world at large. Well, we began caregiving classes. We began doing surveys of the employees. During the pandemic, it's very interesting, I ended up doing over 878 one-on-ones. Now, many of them had many more than one session. And I did 72 memorial services sitting here in my bedroom on a Zoom full. Now, no one ever touched that seminary.
No, they don't.
But it was about being present for the moment, because it's about being present. So that is how it all began, and how we slowly began. And now we're at a very special space in America. But pushing and getting people to understand all three legs of the healthcare stool. Because without the family caregiver, that stool will not stand. The healthcare system. They are the most vital because they know more than anyone about the patient.
They do.
And who?
160 degrees of the whole situation.
They know what makes them physical, emotional, and spiritual. What makes them tick. What makes them have the decisions that they're going to have. And no doctor is going to know that necessarily, because that takes a great deal of knowing a person. They can say yes, yes, yes to be polite to the doctor, but it's not about being polite to the doctor. It's about advocacy for yourself. Right. That is so important.
Right. And it takes so much advocacy. Greg, I know that you were invited to the White House recently. What happened there?
Well, actually, if I may just take a second, there have been 3 huge events that have happened that have taken caregivers from being the silent patients to, as Jason Resendez, who is the president and CEO of the National Alliance for Caregiving, recently said, America, a land of caregivers. That is huge. Yes, I was invited for a very special event, but it was based upon 3 things that had happened. Number 1 was in fall. The HHS, Health and Human Services Administration on Community Living, gave the blessing to something that we've all sat on many committees and been privileged to participate in, and that was a national roadmap for family caregiving. It wasn't prescriptive in saying, do this, do this, do this. It was empowering with 5 major points, and that's very exciting. So that was the first step. It really put it at the national level, and then with empowering it and structuring it through the states. Then, in March of this year, AARP came out with a fabulous study. It was entitled Valuing the Invaluable, and it stated that in the year 2021, the value of unpaid family caregiving, unpaid, in other words, what that service would represent, $600 billion US. Now, I don't have to tell you, that got the attention of a lot of people whose attention we could never get a hold of.
Oh, I bet.
The bean counters were thrilled. So heaven was blessing us. Then, as people began saying, well, this represents so much, and look what they're doing, and people began to take it seriously. Corporations began talking more, how can we help our employees who are doing this kind of work? And the White House became involved. And so, yes, 2 weeks ago, there was an incredibly beautiful ceremony down there at which our president told his caregiving story. The story of being a man whose first wife and child were killed, and he suddenly was the caregiver. And the things he had to do with his family to make the accommodations to be on the train, that's where he became so known for going back and forth. So we suddenly had the President of the United States telling his caregiving story. It wasn't about other people. And that's always the strongest thing. Yeah. It's your story. And as a result, that day, he signed 350 executive orders. Because what happened in that period of time, from the HHS National Roadmap to the White House event, finally everyone agreed. And it's very much what I'm going to be talking about as the final points in Bangkok, is we realized we're all in this together. And each segment thinks theirs is the most important, and it is to them because they're going through it. But in order to get action and get support and get financing and that sort of thing, it needed to be together. So these actions, the executive orders, involve children, it involves youth, it involves the veterans, it involves disability, and it involves the seniors. It's called life. But it took a long time to put all the pieces together because so many people were advocating for their own situation. But now that that has happened and people are doing extraordinarily wonderful things, there are going to be funds that are going to be available for more training, for more support. There's going to be a greater respect for the family caregiver as being a partner in healthcare, and in my opinion, the most valuable. Because, as we said, they know what is going on and can inform the professional caregiver, and they can inform the patient. And that's where we again go back to who we are. I mean, I have given so many lectures just on the topic of family and caregiving, talking of the many types of family, but caregiving. I always say, we are not cure givers. We're caregivers. What's the difference? A cure giver means a change in something, a diagnosis that is cured. That's the medical profession. That is the divine, the universe, God, whatever word you like to use, at work. That's not our role. Our role is the caregiver, which means accepting things just as they are for this minute, not getting caught up in what happened yesterday and not planning the funeral, just staying where we are today.
And I feel, Greg, that's so poignant, because I feel like, especially pre-pandemic, there was just no value placed upon it, because it is the unsung hero. it's not the doctor who's making miracles happen. It's not the amazing result of prayer by a community and cancer is gone, or, you know, it's the person who is changing the diapers. It's the person who's cleaning up when the person gets sick. It's the person who's, you know, stressed out about work and feeling guilty. You know, I just think about the value equation, and in so many instances in the corporations that I worked for, if you talked about, you know, if you had kids, it was a strike against you because you couldn't stay till midnight and work. If you were, you would never admit that you were caring for a relative or a sick person, because, and then what do you think is changing about, and especially since the pandemic, about the value of life and love? I love how you just said that these are all the this is life. Like, these are all the phases of life that they're finally recognizing. We're finally recognizing as a society. And I know for me as a mom, raising my daughter, and then especially during the pandemic, which was so hard, I realized, I had this realization that I am only on this earth to learn to love unconditionally. I'm not here to be a successful professional. I'm not here to be a great writer or a this or that, all the things that I think, you know. I'm here to learn how to love unconditionally. And it put that pressure on me, that positive pressure, like a diamond gets formed from. What's changing?
I think we have come to realize that we are born to die. As Ram Dass says, and I love much of his writing, but I love it, our ultimate journey or our ultimate duty is to walk each other home.
Ugh.
After this, I'm about to go to a funeral of a very dear friend that I had the privilege of walking home. I got to change collars and head uptown. But it was a journey that was blessed by walking together. And we all learned that as thousands of people were dying, some very close to us, some so close to us, and we couldn't even be close to them. So everything got turned around in the priorities. We also came to realize that we aren't our jobs. Each of us is a precious child of the divine. And I believe we made in the ground, however you use that word. If you've been wounded by religion, use anything you like. And it's okay to be wounded by religion. If whatever your faith journey may have been and it doesn't work for you, my feeling is don't spend your life fighting it. If somebody gave it to you, bless them and give it back, because it certainly isn't helping you. Go on and find a new way, a new word, because it's only when we begin the most important journey, and that is going within ourselves, the spark of the divine, that the universe is there. And when we can align with that, then we become physically, emotionally, and spiritually strong. And that, I believe, is the gift that has come out of the pandemic. And it is the reason I think that we are also seeing the enormous value and blessing that caregivers are. And we want them to know they're not alone. I did a series recently, again, I updated it, but it's an 8-part series on You Are Not Alone. It is an introduction, what is family, what is caregiving, then physical, emotional, spiritual, and then we talk about grief. Too often people don't realize death is not the end of the caregiving journey. We may have walked into the labyrinth with our loved one and left them in the center with the divine. But we now need to walk back out, giving ourselves the love and the care that we gave to that person. We need to heal, and we need to learn the lessons that we're going to tell our caregivers. Because as Rosalind Carter said, there are only 4 types of people in the world. Those who are caregivers today, those who have been caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will be cared for. And I've just gone through that with a hip replacement. That is what it's about. And so we need people to know we are not alone. I think you have found it. I have found it. There's very little anyone can tell me. I have the great blessing of being a recovering alcoholic for a very, very long time. And I often say I learned more about God and the higher power in the rooms of AA than I ever did in seminary. And I am not being unkind to seminary, but it's true because I needed to take that walk within and to find the loving essence and that, yes, we can. But for so many of us, our worlds have been the perpendicular pronoun.
Yeah.
I know for me, the day I walked into a room of AA and saw the 12 steps, and I looked at the first word, it said we. I thought, I finally belong.
So countercultural.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It isn't all about me. So, and it's one of the reasons as an ordained minister that I talk about the fact that I am in recovery, because I'm very grateful for it. It's the core of my life. But I'm also someone who talks about the fact of having a therapist for 30 years.
Yes.
Poor man, I feel sorry for him. We keep walking together. But it's important that people know that. Doctors and clergy are not God, and they get treated that way too often. We're simply children of the divine like they are. We may have studied certain things, but we're here to help. We're here to love. We're here to care.
And our mental health impacts the mental health of everyone around us. The children thing, the people we're caring for, the people we're living with day to day in community, we affect each other so deeply. And I feel like because of our focus on individualism and success and prosperity, we often don't realize that we can't even exist without the other. And Greg, your words are always so beautiful, and I just really appreciate you being here with us today. I know you have to get uptown to Riverside. Any last parting words about the importance of mental health?
My last words would be, don't be afraid. You have a great blessing waiting for you, because you're going to find out just how wonderful you are and how wonderful the divine within you. And when that divine in you is healing, you then can speak to others without even using words. The energy and the love will heal you and the other person. I've done that many times with dementia patients or people in comas. They're not alone still. As long as they're breathing, we can care. And that's what caregivers do. We accept the situation just as it is. And I have to end with the 3 words I say normally at the beginning of any talk. I always say, if you don't remember anything else I'm about to say, hear the 2 words that family caregivers rarely, if ever, hear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Greg, thank you so much. And we appreciate everybody being here to hear these words of wisdom. And we wish you well with your own mental health journeys. Please visit us at kulaforkarma.org and check out the services that we provide and join us, become a part of our community. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend, everybody.
And you, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.